Hey guys, welcome to Choke Points. In this video, we are going to talk about free trade agreements. And this is going to be a very interesting topic because things that I'm going to show you, that I'm going to talk about, will probably make you question lots of things that we know and the geopolitics as we know. Okay. So let's get started. Please do like and subscribe, and let's talk about our free trade agreement. Okay. Now, what exactly is free trade agreement if you look into it? See, according to a casual definition, okay, a free trade agreement basically is a legally binding treaty that commits countries to reducing the tariffs and other restrictions on thousands of trade lines or tariff lines, okay, over normally 5 to 10 or 15 years. Okay, it progresses slowly. It's not just something that it happens overnight, but countries are then bound to those agreements. Now, you might have heard about India's free trade agreement, then you might have heard about uh, US free trade agreement with Mexico, Canada, all these countries, then UK, right? So lots of these things are happening among other major powers and countries, right? Then also the modern free trade agreements, they also cover services, investments, intellectual property, then dispute settlement, then profit sharing, then rules of origin. So lots of other things are discussed beyond just a trade or just the trade of commodities or the products. Okay. Now, these things basically control the whole entire industrial policy. And once the free trade agreement is signed, then it's up to the traders to deal with it. Okay. It's up to the traders to deal with it. This is why governments, when this before signing the free trade agreement, okay, governments work with the traders, they discuss these things with the traders as to what exactly do we need to do. And uh, and based on that, a free trade agreement document is drafted. Okay, these things, it's not unilaterally done by the government that okay, let's go, let's UK and India, let's sign the free trade agreement. No, India's prime minister or Indian government is going to discuss all these things with the Indian businesses as to hey, what exactly do you want? What should be our next free trade agreement? And what should be put into it? All those discussions are done. All right. So you have to understand this is very critical thing. And this is why I'll just give you India's perspective here, that this is why India did not sign any FTA with US, but because US India simply said that okay, oh, no, there will be no trade deal as far as agriculture is concerned. Why? Because the Indian farmers, the agriculture industry, and all that, they simply made government aware of their intent on this whole thing and their concerns on this thing. Okay, so then what exactly I'm talking about in this video, right? See, lots of people assume that if BRICS is serious, okay, then it should have free trade agreement. Now I'm coming to, after all that, right? I'm coming to the free trade agreement within the BRICS bloc. Now, if I ask you a question as to which BRICS countries have signed the free trade agreement with each other, is there any? I mean, BRICS really, brags about uh, being a economic bloc. They talk about trade in national currencies. They talk about de-dollarization, all kinds of things they talk about. But is there a free trade agreement among the BRICS countries? Answer is flat out no. It should have free trade agreement by now, but this whole entire assumption itself is wrong, right? So what happens when it comes to BRICS and all? Then free trade agreements are not just the badges of cooperation that yeah, yay, BRICS is all FTA, and these things don't happen. This is an economic contract. This is a binding agreement. Okay, this shapes the industries. This creates winners and losers, like that, right? So the real question is that why the BRICS has failed to sign an FTA. And those are the reasons we are going to discuss in this video. Okay, we are going to talk about all that and why that's the case, right? And in fact, it's not just that why BRICS hasn't signed any FTA, it's also that the BRICS countries actually avoid it too. Okay, okay. So after all that unity and all the talk of de-dollarization, trade in national currencies and all that, they actively avoid signing the free trade agreement. I mean, look at Russia and China. They talk about all that bonhomie and yay, we are brothers and in arms and this and that. We will destroy America. All that thing they talk, but they don't have any free trade agreement. Then look at India and Russia. There is no free trade agreement between them. Okay, so in this video what we are going to do, we will quickly break down the what exactly FTA does, and why BRICS countries do not have any free trade agreement. What are the reasons behind it? All right, so let's discuss it, let's talk about it, let's get going. And please do like and subscribe, and let me share my slide real quick. Okay, so first of all, I want to actually share something real quick with you guys. Okay. So stay with me till the end, because this is going to be interesting, because when I'm done with it, you'll realize how things can be, looks can be deceptive, at least when it comes to BRICS. And I'm not talking crap about BRICS. Okay. I'm not saying that BRICS is bad or anything, but I think that there are certain fundamental problems within the BRICS bloc that need to be sorted out. If BRICS wants to become a rock solid block that can actually withstand the test of time, so that needs to happen. Now before anything, and let me show you something real quick. Okay, so this is my X. Please go, and you can go and follow it, like and follow whatever you want to do. And right here is the X handle. Okay, now let's look at this. Now in in past 5 years, India has signed free trade agreements. All right, now what do you see? India and New Zealand free trade agreement, 2025. India and Oman free trade agreement, India and UK free trade agreement, then India and something EFTA, TEPA, all that. Okay, there are a few group of countries here. All right, India and Australia free trade agreement, then India and UAE free trade agreement, and India and Mauritius free trade agreement. What do you see here? What is the unusual thing? The unusual thing here is that New Zealand was is not part of BRICS. Oman is not part of BRICS. UK is not part of BRICS. If you look at EFTA, these countries, they are not part of BRICS. Australia is not part of BRICS. UAE, when India signed it, UAE was not part of BRICS either. UAE joined BRICS in 2024, actually. Okay, and then Mauritius, same thing. Do you see any BRICS country here? None, right? So, and this is what I'm talking about. All right. When I saw this thing, I was like, okay, this blew my mind. I was like, okay, let me do some more research on it. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about India's FTA experience. Now, India has signed almost 13 to 14 trade agreements, but only few are deeply commercially significant. Okay, now early days, what happened is that when India around 2010 and all that, India signed a free trade agreement with ASEAN and all. So what happened is that in India became part of RCEP. RCEP basically was a Russia China economic whatever alliance, in which there were like ASEAN countries and all that whole bunch of countries were involved in it. Okay, in that RCEP. Now with that, what happened is that uh, India all of a sudden started to get into this whole problem of trade deficit. It happened really, really fast. Okay, so because of that, because of so much trade imbalance was there, India had to move into the selective and phased FTAs. This is why you notice that it took a while for India and UK to sign the free trade agreement. Okay, then India and Australia also now signed it, but it took a while. Now see, there is a thing in between India and Australia too, that India and Australia have been very good friends and this and that, all that good stuff is there, but it took time because Australia technically is a United Kingdom's dominion. All right, same thing with New Zealand. All right, they all fall under the Queen's flag. Okay, So so of course Australia was going to take its time. I mean, at least they were going to wait until UK gives them a go ahead. All right. So this is why when UK, as soon as UK's deal was done, Australia and New Zealand was also done real quick. All right. So now another thing is with India's FTA experience is India still maintains 11 to 12% average tariffs on the products as a tool for of industrial policy so that they can control things. All right. Now, so but now let's look into the intra-BRICS FTA reality. What exactly is going on here? Now, BRICS has what, 10 full members representing almost 36 to 37% of global GDP by purchasing power parity, and 45% of world's population, and 29% to 30% almost in nominal GDP terms. Okay. But despite all this scale, what do you see? Zero BRICS wide free trade agreements. Okay, zero BRICS trade agreements, zero bilateral FTAs between two BRICS full members. They just don't exist. Now, I'm gonna give you some more scale here, numbers. Okay, like for example, India and Russia, they brag about, okay, they brag about about $65 billion of trade. That kind of trade volume they talk about. Oh, we have $65 billion of trade. But the reality is this, that it is so much one sided that India only exports $5 billion worth of goods to Russia and imports $60 billion worth of commodities from Russia. 60 billion. That's how much big the trade imbalance is. Let's look at China. India and China have $130 billion of trade, okay? $130 billion. They brag about it. And China, when Chinese have to do something, Chinese will say, "Oh, India is our one of our largest, biggest partners. This is India's biggest partner is China. This that." But the reality is this: reality is that India only exports $18 billion worth of stuff, worth of stuff to China. Rest is imports. That's how much the disparity is. The trade disparity is between the BRICS countries. Okay. Now let's go back to here. So intra-BRICS trade accounts for only 15 to 17% of total BRICS trade. Think about it. Now, if you look at the comparison of BRICS members trading with the European Union and BRICS members trading with the United States and all that, okay, you find that the European Union internal is 60 to 65%. Okay, compared to European Union's internal trade is 60 to 65%. But BRICS countries also trade like that with these countries, with the European Union and all that. Okay. And then USMCA also like that, 45 to 50% within that block. Okay. But BRICS countries don't have, they have only 15 to 17%. So what exactly this slide here is saying is the European Union internal trade within the European Union country, it is 60 to 65%, whereas the North America's continent here is 45 to 50%. But when it comes to the BRICS bloc, it's just 15 to 17%. Now, I was actually looking at this white paper on how the BRICS countries actually trade with the European Union and all that. I was surprised to see this thing. The number was staggering high, and what's interesting is that's not the number when it comes to the BRICS countries among themselves. And they all talk about de-dollarization. They talk about how West is oppressing them and all that thing, but at the end of the day, when it comes to trade, that's where they want to go and trade. So what exactly is the problem here, right? That's the question we have to ask. Clearly, those are all, when it comes to diplomacy, they're all seasoned diplomats. They are great leaders in their own, you know stride, whatever that is, right? But at the end of the day, what happens? Why BRICS becomes ineffective completely when it comes to signing the free trade agreement? So I will tell you. Okay, first reason is that there is no institutional backbone. Everything like G7 and all, right? For example, G7 and all. G7, at first it was like, okay, we are a multilateral bloc. That's what they call themselves. But later on, when the petrodollar actually took off, then US became the sole leader of G7. And that was pretty obvious I mean, this was pretty obvious reason, not because that US bullied them into it. But the reality is this, that if a country is bearing the most of the burden and your other countries, out of 7 countries, 6 countries, their economy is going downhill, and one country is there, that is US, whose economy is going upwards, then of course they become the leader, right? Why? Because they are the ones handling everything. So but G7, so because the US became the leader in G7, so they started to make the decisions based on that leadership. Okay. Whereas if you look at BRICS, there is no institutional backbone, there is no trade secretariat, there is no unified custom framework, no enforcement body or nothing. Okay. Now this was pretty actually clear. I'll tell you, this was very clear to me when I saw all this, when I started to track the President Trump's tariffs on the BRICS countries, like Brazil was hit with tariff, India was hit with tariff, China was under tariff war, all that. When that started, now when that started, then number one thing, what BRICS did, they all were in panic mode. Second thing was that they organized this emergency so-called meeting, but not a single BRICS leader or not a single BRICS country actually went on to say, hey, we are going to use this regulation, like NATO has Article 5, they invoke Article 5 and all that. So BRICS never said anything, hey, we are going to invoke Article 10 or something, and we are going to work together, and this tariff, they're applying tariffs, let's work together and we all are going to apply tariff on American products or something. None of them did that. China said, okay, we will buy some stuff from Brazil. Then India said that, oh, you guys had there is a trade imbalance. You guys needs to fix this and this and that. They all basically said whatever they had to say, and then meeting was adjourned. But nothing happened. Why? Because that's when I realized that they don't have any regulations. They lack that framework, the institutional backbone. Okay. So, and since 2009, they haven't produced any FTAs, zero completely. Okay. So that's one reason. And we saw this thing happening during the tariff war, right? The trade war. Like China is fighting its battle, but if their BRICS was such a thing, or BRICS is there, and BRICS really means something, then yeah, I think that all the BRICS members should work together to sort all that out as to, hey, yeah, let's do it. But they have shown the unity, but because of lack of institutional backbone, direction is not there, the response is not there, even though they tried to do a unified response on things, but it's just not there. Okay. Then next reason is that uh, there is very low trade incentive, okay, among the BRICS countries. When BRICS countries trade with each other, uh, it's a different ball game. Now I'll tell you why that is. Okay. That's because that BRICS countries basically export the same type of stuff. Okay. Meaning that, let's say, simplest example, let's just say go with simple example. Okay. Simple example being what China is exporting. Let's China is exporting shoes, and India is also manufacturing, exporting shoes. Then what do you think is going to happen? If China and India sign the free trade agreement, then what happens? But they're going to say, hey, your shoes are acceptable in our market, and our shoes are acceptable in your market. I mean, what good that does to China anyways? But China is basically inviting another competitor in the market, that too on a free trade agreement. Why would they do that? Same thing with India. Why would India do that? Right? So so because of the nature of things that they manufacture, this is that's a problem, right? There's no major trade incentive as such, if you ask me. Okay. And if they do internal trade, there is none. Like, for example, another example, right? Another example being Russia and India. If you go and really track closely between Russian and Indian diplomats, when they talk about the trade imbalance, okay, when they talk about trade imbalance, then Russians always say this thing that, hey, we are still trying to figure out what we can import from India. We do want to do that, but unfortunately, fortunately, we just don't know what exactly should we import from India that we already don't have. And considering that, a when it comes to the I mean, considering the country like Russia, right, where most of there is very less agricultural land and all that, and the manufacturing output is not as much either. So whatever oligarchs manufacture or do over there, the Russians have to protect that. Like if you have very less industries, then you definitely want to protect your industry, right? You don't want to kill that industrial output by importing stuff from other countries. So that's Russia's problem. So if Russia starts to import goods from India, then chances are that those things will be killed as well. And then also another factor is that Chinese pressure too, because China also sells the same product that India sells. So now Chinese are worried that if Russians start to import from India as well, then there will be a competition for Chinese products in the Russian market. So Chinese put pressure on India that, okay, sorry, on Russia, not to do anything. So you see, there is no free trade agreement between Russia and India, even though India is in talks with the in talks with Eurasian Union, okay, EAEU, uh, to sign a free trade agreement, and in EAU, Russia is part of it. Okay, so they're still trying to figure out those nuances and the terms and conditions of how they are going to manage that. And when that happens, only it's a matter of time. We don't know when. Okay, but there it's in talks. All right. Now, India and China. Look at India and China. There is no free trade agreement, right? So it's all made. Second, the reason is that it's mainly because of the low internal trade incentive. Now, another problem is that the scale asymmetry. Now, if you look into the scale is asymmetry, China accounts for roughly 65% of BRICS manufacturing output, okay, and 70% of BRICS manufactured export. That's how much the scale difference is. Okay, so China's manufacturing value exceeds the combined output of 9 BRICS members. So even reciprocal tariff cuts would lead to asymmetric trade flow. So if they start to do all that reciprocal tariffs and all that, then still there will be a sort of asymmetric trade flow. There will be trade imbalance, and will be serious trade imbalance, especially if India is also manufacturing the same goods. So for India to import Chinese good, what happens is that it actually kills the local market. And this happened in India. Actually, this happened in India, and this happened in America too. That when they started to import Chinese products, that too without free trade agreement. Okay, you have to understand. So when they started to import, then the trade imbalance between US and China is $160 billion, which is way more than the total trade between India and China. Okay. And same thing happened in India too. Chinese products, they started to kill the Indian markets. So India was forced to actually get rid of those products from the Indian markets, all those Chinese products. Okay. So the scale of asymmetry is so much scary. Unless your country, I mean, it's so scary that unless your country is really ready to accept the entire product, all the products and manufacturing from China into your market, because why? Because you don't have any other option. Doing anything else is just fatal for your local industries. Now, if a country, for example, there is some African country, there are lots of small African countries that have practically no industrial output, and there are no internal competitions. So what they can do is that they can accept these Chinese products in their market, and they can allow it. So for them, completely allowing all that makes sense. But for within other BRICS countries, it doesn't make sense, right? Simply because of the scale of the asymmetry. It's so big that it's just unacceptable, right? Then uh, another thing is that another thing is this, that is the tariff problem. Okay, tariff are still active policy tools. Now you can be like, what? Yes, so every BRICS country right now, because to protect their own interests, they apply tariffs on the products. Why? Because um, there is a competition between the BRICS countries among each other, simply because of the reasons I explained. Okay, if there was a diversity in the exports or the trade, then you can see that, yeah, there will be much better collaboration. But when you see that India is manufacturing the same thing, Brazil is manufacturing same thing, and China is manufacturing the same thing, then for them to sign all that doesn't make any sense. And because there is a competition, so these countries are forced to apply the tariffs too. Now you see how it's a web, right? It's a web. It's like an entanglement that, okay, all these countries, they are forced, because of their own economic policies, they cannot just, they're forced to not sign the free trade agreements. Okay, so India basically like 12% tariff, Brazil 13%, Indonesia, South Africa 8 to 9%. Think about it. And these tariffs basically what they support the domestic industry, employment, and revenue. So, especially in a country with such a high population, in India, where you, you have to have all that, right? Without that, there is a problem. So, what FTA would do? FTA would permanently restrict this flexibility, which most BRICS governments are unwilling to give up, right? So that's another reason. Then it comes down to trade. Basically, they run on external systems. So, what do you mean by trade run on external system? I made a video on this thing just a couple of days ago about the maritime trade. Hmm? Maritime trade, as in how the shadow fleet and all that. And in the maritime trade video, basically, I explained how all the maritime trade really works. Okay, and how the Western companies have basically acquired the 90% of the business, the insurance business, and all that. Hmm? The risk mitigation business, I would say. Hmm? So, if you look into it, then you find the 80 to 85% global trade finances, and it's financed in dollar. In fact, lots of BRICS countries, yeah, they talk about it that, yeah, let's trade in national currencies and all that. But reality is this: reality is that even India and China, they don't trade in national currencies. India and Russia do, Russia and China do, India and Indonesia does. But do they trade with? Is that the case with all the BRICS countries? No, that's not the case. Most of the countries still they use the dollar, right? Then 90% of the maritime insurance is priced by London and European Union linked markets. What does that mean? So even if you sign the free trade agreement, okay, but if you are still bound by the external system that are beyond your control, then you cannot avoid the extra tariffs or the tolls or the extra fees that is involved, or the hurdles or the roadblocks that are involved because of these external factors. Like for example, Russia, after Russia is sanctioned, it doesn't matter. Russia can sign all the free trade agreement with Brazil and lots of South American countries and all that Russia can do. But can Russia dock its ships on these ports? No, Russia cannot do that. Even President Putin cannot even go to Brazil for any kind of BRICS summit, let alone docking the ship on the Brazilian ports. Why? Because lots of things that BRICS countries do, it depends on these external systems. Now, what BRICS countries are doing to mitigate this? Yeah, they are coming up with their own trade corridor. They are coming up with their own supply chains. All these things are happening, but to build a system like that, it takes time. Okay, for the West to build something like that, it took almost a century to build something like that. It didn't happen just overnight. Lots of it was established by UK, and then it was transferred over to US. But what BRICS countries are? The BRICS countries have been dependent on all these things, and BRICS was just formed what 2000 in 2009. Give take 16 years. So it's a lengthy process. It takes time. So still, BRICS countries are trying to because trying to bypass all this by how? For example, India is is planning to build 100 cargo ship fleets. Then Russians are already doing that. Chinese are working on it. All these things are already happening, and they will be insured by their own governments. Okay, and then this is why, if you notice, that India and Russia have signed the defense treaty, and India and Indonesia have signed the defense treaty. All right. So all this will be done to control, provide the security in these Indian Ocean region and all that for these shipping lanes, so that nobody goes and tries to strike these ships. All right. So that's another thing they are doing. But external dependencies cannot be controlled. Like for example, if you're trading in dollar, you can sign all the free trade agreement you can sign, and you can also try to trade in national currencies and all that. But ultimately, if your conversion rate is dependent on the dollar, then you will be paying 5% fees no matter what. Forget the national currency trade. If you may have signed the free trade agreement, but if you are trading in dollar, then you still have to pay that extra fees. That has nothing to do with FTA, right? That's why there is no free trade agreement between them either. All right. So then the next one is basically, if you look into it, then it's what BRICS is actually overall in doing. If we talk about it, the ultimate conclusion is that uh, what BRICS lack? BRICS lack the internal trade density, institutional enforcement, regulatory convergence, because it's just not there. These countries cannot converge because of their domestic politics and regional needs and the domestic needs and demands. Okay, so they cannot. Then asymmetric industrial scale, completely asymmetric. Okay, so this is why, if you look into it, then BRICS has never signed any free trade agreement. Is it gonna happen down the line? There is a possibility, but if BRICS manufacturing and everything else diversifies. Now, for example, let's look into the example. For example, uh, India and UK free trade agreement. What is that India offers UK and UK offers India? Right? UK offers probably certain technologies, certain other things, whereas India offers them their manufacturing and other goods, right? And this provides them a solid market. They get the foreign currency, forex reserve goes up, right? And there is a lots of diversity in what UK produces and what India produces. Same thing, like if you go with India and US trade deal, no, it was supposed to go up and all that, but that didn't happen. Okay, but otherwise, look at it. Defense tech, they were working on the defense tech. That work is still underway. But uh, defense tech, then you have energy, then you have few other things that India can work with US. India can sell its products that China sells, and India can work to replace Chinese market. That's another reason, right? That whenever India and China or all the BRICS countries, they go into external market, they're competing with each other. So that's where the problem is. Okay, so all these things, uh, unless they BRICS countries, they come up with some sort of regulation and some sort of agreement with each other to regulate their intra-BRICS trade, I think that we will not see any kind of FTA. Yeah, maybe trade between the BRICS countries may grow. Maybe one-sided trade, I would say, may grow, but we will not see any kind of free trade agreement. And without free trade agreement, I think that it's all just a hype for the most part, and may as when it comes to trade, guys, things get really, really tricky. So unless BRICS really, really moves away from all these external impacts and all that, unless they have their own thing, um, it will be hard. Okay, they will have to they will have to work with other Western countries and all to maintain things. And the primary reason that they trade with Western countries is because that's where the real uh, I would say they can that's how they can protect their markets. You saw how India US trade deal collapsed immediately as soon as US said that okay, let's talk what about the agriculture. The moment they said agriculture, you're like, hey, we don't know you. Who are you? Right? So and that's exactly the case between the BRICS countries. Whenever they talk to each other, all right, let's try. How about we think about BRICS free trade agreement? They discuss it, and then are like, it's a bad idea. Leave it, and then let it go. Okay, so I hope you guys learned something from it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys in another video. Take care.